Episode 57DA February 7, 2025 University Research Indirect Funds and EV Charging Restricted by Trump. In Episode 57DA1 Introduction RAWSEP View 2 United States Washington, D.C. University Research Indirect Funds, restricted by Trump Directive A Trump policy change, will restrict billions in funding for medical research programs at universities. The National Institutes of Health announced a new policy Friday to cap a type of funding that supports medical research at universities, a decision that most likely will leave many with a large budget gap. 3A move to freeze funding for electric vehicle charging stations confounds the states that are building them. 4 firefighter hiring stalls at federal agencies after the freeze of Donald Trump. 5 California Newsom signs bills to fight Trump, and California Gov Gavin Newsom has treaded more cautiously in recent weeks in dealing with Trump after he threatened to withhold disaster aid from California. 6 The right-wing crusade against USAID has been fueled by falsehoods, including a false video. Main content 1 Introduction RAWSEP View. The United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only for home building and furniture building. For just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry, and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating, should continue presumably because it is called renewable. Wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree, but it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM2.5, and PM2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM2.5, particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lung, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom the EcoDesign wood stove, an international convention based on the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. Burning wood instead of coal increases the adverse health effects of PM2.5 air pollution and hastens climate change. Stopping burning wood for residential home heating is an easy incremental way to be kind to your neighbor and to the planet. Choosing to burn wood when burning wood when it is more expensive than heating your home with a heat pump that is less expensive when you use the United States heat pump rebates available in 2025 in many states is like choosing a gas-powered car above an electric car when both are of equal price. Many of the Trump tariffs will result in less manufacture of clean electric vehicles in the United States and less price reduction to customers on existing electric vehicles. 2 United States Washington, D.C. University Research Indirect Funds, restricted by Trump Directive A Trump policy change, will restrict billions in funding for medical research programs at universities. The National Institutes of Health announced a new policy Friday to cap a type of funding that supports medical research at universities, a decision that most likely will leave many with a large budget gap. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity. And relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times February 7, 2025. The policy targets $9 billion in so-called indirect funds that the NIH sends along with direct funds to support research into basic science and treatments for diseases ranging from cancer to Alzheimer's to diabetes. Currently, some universities get 50% or more of the amount of a grant in indirect funds, meaning a $1 million research award would come with $500,000 to maintain facilities and equipment and pay support staff. The new policy would cap those indirect funds at 15%. I think it is going to destroy research universities in the short term, and I do not know after that they rely on the money they budget for the money. The universities were making decisions expecting the money to be there. The policy change would force his university to make cuts to support staff and overhead. The Trump administration has been sharply critical of what it derides as woke policies and cultures at universities, which have been bracing for a hit to their budgets. Project 2025, a set of conservative policy proposals called for capping these related research funds. Project 2025 authors said an NIH social media post said the change could save the federal government as much as $4 billion and sharply cut payments to Harvard, Yale, and Johns Hopkins universities, which have overhead rates above 60% of their grant. Some Senator Patty Murray, a Democrat of Washington, said in a statement late Friday that the move could dismantle the biomedical research system, stifle the development of new cures for disease, and rip treatments away from patients in need. She said the change could shut down some clinical trials at institutions in her state, such as the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Center and University of Washington. The NIH spent about $35 billion in 2023 on about 50,000 competitive grants to about 300,000 researchers at 2,500 universities, medical schools, and other research institutions nationwide. According to the new policy of that, about $26 billion directly funded research and $9 billion covered indirect costs. The policy is set to take effect Monday. 3 United States Washington, D.C. A move to freeze funding for electric vehicle charging stations confounds the states that are building them. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity. And relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. A new Federal order that freezes a Biden-era program to build a national network of electric vehicle charging stations has confounded states which had been allocated billions of dollars by Congress for the program. In interviews on Friday, some state officials said that as a result of the memo from the Trump administration, they had stopped work on the charging stations. Others said they intended to keep going. In Ohio, Gov Mike DeWine, Republican, has welcomed federal money to build 19 EV charging stations. The February 6 memo signed by Emily Biondi, an associate administrator at the U.S. Transportation Department, said that the administration was suspending approval of state electric vehicle infrastructure deployment plans. The memo singled out the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure, or NEVI program, which was authorized under the 2021 Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. A national network of fast charging stations was part of the effort of President Joseph R. Biden Jr. to combat climate change by accelerating the transition of the nation to electric vehicles. Under the program, states were to receive $5 billion to build 500,000 charging stations by 2030. To date, about $33 billion has been allocated to states. Of that, $511 million has been awarded in contracts, but only $40 million has been spent. Clarification has been requested as to whether the freeze applied to money that has been allocated but not awarded by states to contractors. Trump is opposed to federal support for electric vehicles. He has promised to revoke pollution limits on automobiles that were designed to increase sales of zero-emissions cars and to end federal tax credits of up to $7,500 to buyers of electric vehicles. Vermont, which has built 4 charging ports at one location with the federal funds, will halt work on its program, said the policy director at the Vermont Agency of Transportation. In December, the state awarded 11 new projects to add 60 charging ports across the state. Some state officials said the directive of the federal government would not substantially change their plans. The Maryland Department of Transportation said in a statement that it was moving forward with its obligated NEVI funding. Maryland is committed to pressing forward with our strategy to deliver charging infrastructure for clean cars to drivers across the state. Officials at the Tennessee Department of Transportation said the state would continue to finalize contracts with companies during the pause. Tennessee has not yet opened a charging station with the federal funding, although it has selected 30 sites. If plans for the federally funded charging stations are canceled, it could harm companies in regions and industries that are typically aligned with Trump. One of the largest recipients of the state EV charging money is Love's, an Oklahoma-based truck stop company with more than 600 gasoline and diesel stations and convenience stores. Several states use their NEVI funding to sign contracts with the company to build EV charging stations. The chief analyst at Perrin, an EV analytics company, said the pause of the program would be most felt in rural areas where companies have less reason to build chargers without federal subsidies. The whole role and value of the program is putting those charging stations out in upstate New York or rural Alabama. For United States, Washington, D.C. Firefighter hiring stalls at federal agencies after the freeze of Donald Trump. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against with smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization, the hiring of thousands of federal firefighters has stalled amid a government-wide freeze ordered by Trump, just as agencies were beginning to ramp up staffing for the summer wildfire season. According to a union of firefighters, the executive order issued by Trump hours after his inauguration stated that the freeze exempted public safety positions, yet federal firefighters in recent weeks have had their job offers rescinded or had their start dates pushed back as a handful of agencies work to clear up confusion about the freeze or secure exemptions from it, said a spokesman and member of the National Federation of Federal Employees, a union that represents roughly 15,000 federal firefighters. Federal agencies that hire firefighters include the U.S. Forest Service, the Bureau of Land Management, the National Park Service, and the U.S. Department of Fish and Wildlife. Human resources workers at the Forest Service had told firefighter job candidates that their exemptions to the executive order had not yet been approved, so onboarding would be delayed. The Forest Service employs the majority of federal firefighters with more than 11,000 on staff. As of July 2024, a spokesperson for the Forest Service said it had been actively working with the Office of Personnel Management (OPM) on its wildland firefighting positions. A spokesperson for the Department of the Interior, which oversees the Bureau of Land Management, the National Park Service, and the Fish and Wildlife Service, said the agency was implementing the order of Donald Trump and working with OPM, and that the executive order allowed for exemptions for certain positions, including those related to public safety. Federal firefighters helped battle blazes that devastated parts of Los Angeles last month during the Palisades and Eaton fires, both of which destroyed thousands of homes, businesses, and other structures. Fire, the firefighting agency of the state, called the Forest Service an important partner in its efforts to combat ever-worsening wildfires. It is unknown at this time how this freeze will impact the protection of federal lands in California, a Cal Fire spokeswoman said in a statement. Firefighters who battled the Palisades and Eaton fires have been affected by the hiring freeze. Many of those firefighters who had applied for promotions within their organizations have had their start dates delayed by weeks. He added that federal firefighters served as reinforcements for local and state fire departments during the fires in Los Angeles and were heavily involved from the beginning because the Eaton fire initially was burning in the foothills of the Angeles National Forest, which is overseen by the Forest Service. A Forest Service firefighter based in Los Angeles County said he received an email this week notifying him that his promotion set to take effect in a few days would be delayed for at least 2 weeks because of the federal hiring freeze. The firefighter said he and his colleagues were exhausted from working hundreds of hours of overtime. In January alone, he fought the Hearst fire, which broke out in the San Fernando Valley on the same day as the Palisades and Eaton fires. Separately from the executive order, the Office of Personnel Management instructed agency heads last month to turn over the names of employees still on their probationary periods. The directive noted that such employees can be terminated during that period without triggering appeal rights, and that managers should determine whether they should be retained. The Forest Service has roughly 2,000 firefighters who are considered on probation and whose jobs could be on the line as a result of that. OPM Directive 5. California Newsom signs bills to fight Trump, and California Gov Gavin Newsom has treaded more cautiously in recent weeks in dealing with Trump after he threatened to withhold disaster aid from California. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against with smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, February 7, 2025. 2 days after meeting with Trump at the White House to seek disaster aid, Gov Gavin Newsom of California signed legislation on Friday that authorized $50 million million in state funds intended to counter the agenda of the president. Half of the money was dedicated to legal aid, including for undocumented immigrants without criminal records who have faced deportation threats from the Trump administration, and the other half was intended to cover additional state litigation costs as California spars with the federal government in court. Newsom signed a pair of bills with no news cameras, bringing to a quiet end an effort he launched with vigor 2 days after the election 3 months ago. He asked state lawmakers to move quickly to defend the state from presumed incursions by Trump and called for a special legislative session. The governor seemed to be positioning himself as a national leader of the Democratic resistance in the days following the election, but he has treaded more cautiously in recent weeks after the president threatened to withhold disaster aid from California on Wednesday. He met with Trump for more than an hour in the Oval Office. The bill signed by Newsom passed on a party line vote. Democrats, who hold more than 2/3 of the state legislative seats, press the need to gird for legal battles with the Trump administration. Californians are being threatened by an out-of-control administration in Washington that does not care about the Constitution, that thinks there are no limits to its power, the Democratic Assembly Speaker said as lawmakers passed the bills on Monday. We do not trust Trump. The rightward shift that the nation experienced in the last election was evident in California state contests as well. Republicans flipped 3 state legislative seats previously held by Democrats, and Trump won 10 counties that former President Joseph R. Biden Jr. carried in 2022. Of the counties fell partly in a Central Valley district represented by a Democratic Assemblywoman. The legislation lays the groundwork for California to resume its role of jousting with the federal government. The state sued the Trump administration more than 100 times during the first term of the president and has been involved in 3 lawsuits challenging his order since Trump re-entered the White House last month. 6 United States, Washington, D.C. The right-wing crusade against USAID has been fueled by falsehoods, including a false video excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against with smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The video falsely claiming that the United States Agency for International Development paid Ben Stiller, Angelina Jolie, and other actors millions of dollars to travel to Ukraine appeared to be a clip from E! News, though it never appeared on the entertainment channel. In fact, the video first surfaced on X in a post from an account that researchers have said spreads Russian disinformation. Within hours, it drew the attention of Elon Musk, who reposted it. So did Trump Jr. They amplified the false video as Musk pressed a crusade to shut down USAID, the agency that has distributed much of the foreign aid of the government since 1961, working with the blessing of Donald Trump. Blessing as the head of a government efficiency campaign, Musk and others in the administration have taken over the headquarters of the agency, frozen grants, and notified employees that nearly all of them will be laid off by Wednesday afternoon. Prime Minister Viktor Orban of Hungary, the authoritarian leader, echoed the claims swirling in the United States, writing on X that payments to Politico somehow financed basically the entire left-wing media in Hungary for Russia and China. The American conservative uproar over USAID has been met with startled glee. Both nations, echoing the complaint of Orban, have blamed the agency for supporting subversive programs in their countries. President Vladimir V. Putin of Russia banned USAID grants in 2012 and expelled the workers of the agency, accusing the United States of funding opponents of his rule. Officials from Republican and Democratic administrations have argued that the programs simply promoted civil society in Russia. A spokeswoman for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia ridiculed a series of grants that have been criticized in the United States too, and claimed the underlying purpose of the agency was to promote political uprisings, citing protests in Egypt in 2011, Ukraine in 2014, and Georgia last year. The false video that went viral this week claiming USAID funded celebrity travel overseas fit the recurring narrative of Russia that the United States furtively supports Ukraine with resources that American voters would rather spend at home. The video appeared to be the work of an influence campaign known to researchers as Operation Overload or Matryoshka, after the Russian nesting dolls. That work is led by a private company with links to the Kremlin. By Thursday, users on TikTok and the Truth social platform of Donald Trump had shared the video as commenters expressed outrage and called for USAID to be eliminated. There is no evidence of the payments in any of the programs of the agency, a spokesman for E! News also said in a statement that the video is not authentic and did not originate from E! News. The actor Ben Stiller, said to have been paid $4 million for a visit to Ukraine, took to social media to try to refute the claim. These are lies coming from Russian media. He wrote on X, "I completely self-funded my humanitarian trip to Ukraine. There was no funding from USAID, and certainly no payment of any kind." More conspiratorially minded supporters of Musk continue to cheer the billionaire on anyway. They include a food service worker and Army National Guard veteran who was blamed in 2022 for starting a conspiracy theory about American biological weapons laboratories in Ukraine.